Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, as we approach the end of another calendar year, many managers are faced with having difficult conversations with employees about their performance. While it is easy to deliver positive feedback, it can be a challenge to deliver negative performance feedback in a constructive manner. So how should managers approach such performance reviews? Well, Dr. Ryne Sherman from Hogan Assessment Systems joins us now to explain all. Ryan, before we discuss the impending performance reviews and how managers can effectively navigate the delivery of negative feedback, remind us about Hogan Assessment Systems and the services which it provides.
Hi, good morning, Karl. Always great to speak with you. Sure. We are a global provider of personality assessments for businesses and organizations all around the world. We help them make critical decisions around talent regarding personnel decisions like who to hire, who's the right fit for this role, who's high potential. We also help organizations develop their talent, particularly in the leadership domain, identifying potential strengths and potential areas of development for leaders and creating individualized development plans for those individuals to step into leadership roles.
And as we approach the year end, many managers are gearing up to engage with year-end reviews to staff. While it's often easy to provide positive performance reviews, how should they approach reviews that may contain some negative feedback?
Yeah, well, certainly that's one of the biggest challenges is delivering negative feedback. As a manager, you're responsible for holding people accountable. I think many managers want to just, most of us want to be seen as friendly and nice. And so it's very easy to stick with the positive feedback. But it's really critical that you deliver feedback around performance that doesn't have to be negative personally in nature, but it ensures that accountability standards are being met.
And what are the common mistakes that managers make when they're delivering negative feedback?
Well, the most common mistake we see is getting personal. And sometimes when we're delivering feedback, we can feel like it's personal. If one of our staff members has affected us in some way that's hurt our own reputation, we might actually hold that personally against them. And so what I mean by that is making comments like, you always do this, you're doing this kind of thing, making comments about the person themselves rather than comments about the work, comments about the performance and the expectations around performance. I think that's easily the biggest mistake.
And in such situations, how important is it for the manager to start with the positives and also to demonstrate active listening skills?
Yeah, so it's a very common technique in delivering feedback is to start with the positives. I think most people do want to hear what they've done that's positive and productive. It also helps set the stage for the entire conversation by pointing out that this isn't just you do everything wrong, that there are things that you do right and are productive. And I think, in terms of active listening, it's really important for the manager not just to be the one delivering all the feedback, but to also listen to the response from their staff member and be participative in that response. It shouldn't just be a one-way conversation, and that's what we really mean by participating in active listening: is listening to that feedback, taking that feedback in yourself, and considering what the employee has to say.
And is there a particular communication style that you believe to be effective during what can often be challenging conversations?
Yeah, I think the best thing to really do is to try to be straightforward and direct. Too often in these conversations, again, in a way to try to appear overly friendly or nice, you can leave the conversation feeling like you've given a performance review, you've given someone some negative feedback, you've given them something to be accountable for, but they can leave thinking that was great. I didn't hear any negative feedback. Everything was wonderful. So it's really important that you're clear about what performance needs to change and doing so in a direct manner.
In general, people do not respond well to receiving negative feedback about their performance at work. So what type of resistance might a manager expect to hear from an employee?
Well, certainly the biggest piece of resistance is denial, saying, hey, that's not true. I think you're overreacting. You're misperceiving things, right? And part of that's a self-protective mechanism. We want to think of ourselves as good. We want to think of ourselves as effective employees. And so we tend to deny or dismiss the comments. I think the comments are nitpicky and not to weigh those into account. So it's really important for the employee to consider that this is an opportunity for growth, that this is an opportunity to improve, and keep that in mind when receiving that feedback, not to just resist it outright.
So what tips do you have for managers that are faced with resistance or indeed a negative reaction during these conversations?
Yeah, I think this is where it's really important for the manager to set the level in terms of what are our common goals? What are we trying to do here together? And if we agree on where our common ground is, it's a lot easier to say, hey, look, I'm giving you feedback about this because we have common goals that we've agreed upon, and this is going to help us get to those goals going forward. And I think if you can set it that way so that it really can take out that sort of personal aspect of it by saying, this is what we want to achieve together, and here's the feedback for you to help us get there.
And I'm sure as well that when employees hear negative feedback coming at them, the first thing that enters their mind is my job in jeopardy? So how important is it for a manager to provide some reassurance at that point?
First, I think that's a very fair question for the employee to ask. And I think it's in a conversation like this, it is important for the employee to say, to actually ask that question, to say, is my job in jeopardy here, or is there some risk? But I think it's also fair for the manager to point to what they'd like to see going forward rather than focusing too much on the past. I mean, I think the performance review, it's useful to say, hey, this is what's happened in the past, but the conversation needs to shift to what we'd like to see going forward. And that can help provide some reassurance too. If you do these things going forward, then your job won't be at risk.
So once the negative feedback has been delivered, what steps should a manager take to outline the path forward for the employee in question?
Yeah, I think that's really the critical part, right? Is again, not focusing too much on the past and saying, okay, now what can we do going forward? And again, this is where I think it's really helpful to have agreed upon mutual goals, mutual targets. This is the things that we want to achieve. These are the behaviors I want to see out of you going forward because it's going to help us hit a certain set of targets, hit a certain set of goals. I don't think any employee wants to feel like they're being asked to do something that's arbitrary, but if they know that the thing that they're being asked to do, whatever those behaviors are, whatever the performance is, they know that that's connected to some bigger picture, to some larger set of goals that everyone in the company agrees upon, then it really is a lot easier to buy into. It breaks down resistance. And again, I think saying these are the behaviors I'd like to see going forward, and here's how we're going to evaluate progress on those behaviors, I think is really helpful.
And would you recommend that additional reviews are conducted with the employee on a periodic basis to ensure that the performance improvement plan is working?
Yeah, I think that's a really critical part. I would expect most managers to meet on a regular basis with their direct reports to review performance. I don't think performance reviews should be a one-time thing. In fact, there's data and research suggesting that performance reviews that are a one-time, once an annual thing aren't nearly as effective as having regular conversations. And so, yes, I think that should be built into your regular conversations is reviewing performance, reviewing progress towards those new goals.
And where progress is not being achieved, what options are available to the manager at that stage?
Well, I think that's where, again, having that frank conversation where you say, look, we agreed that this was the performance you said you were going to hit, and you haven't done that. I think that's when the employee will have the humility to recognize, yes, I haven't hit those priorities. Now, of course, again, in many cases, there's resistance. Oftentimes, these come with excuses for performance as well. But I think if the employee can be realistic and say, yes, I set these goals with you, we agreed to these goals, and I haven't achieved them, that's when then the employee can start thinking maybe the next steps are to try to find an organization that's a better fit or to find a role where the goals are more achievable.
How vital is it that the manager would make the relevant resources available to the employee to assist them with achieving those goals?
Well, certainly, I think that's a huge part of leadership or management is providing those resources. In fact, I would argue that much of management is about providing resources. It's less about doing and ensuring that the people that you have are capable of doing have the resources they need to accomplish their goals and achieve those. So certainly that would be an important aspect to come up in performance conversations as well. If the employee feels like they don't have the resources, again, it's really important to have a frank and candid conversation with your manager where you can say, I don't have those resources. This is what I would need to achieve these goals.
Are there any tips that you would like to share with employees about how they should approach year-end reviews?
Yeah, I think it really helps to be straightforward and candid with the manager as well. The manager needs to talk about your behavior and what performance you can do. But I also think it's important for the candidate or for the staff member to give the manager feedback as well. Say, these are the things that would help me achieve those goals. These are the goals that we've agreed upon. These are the set of behaviors we've agreed upon. It would help me to achieve those if you provided me with X, Y, and Z, whatever those are.
And Ryne, finally, what impact do you think AI is going to have on the workplace over the next 12 months?
Well, AI is changing the world of work in many, many fashions. Certainly in the area of performance reviews, I can imagine places where AI is going to assist with performance reviews in terms of providing feedback. I think it can help managers deliver feedback in a way that's both direct, non-confrontational, behaviorally based. And I think, as a simple task right now, a manager could take an AI tool. They could summarize the feedback they'd like to give to an employee and have an AI tool write it in a way or give them tips on delivering that material in a way that would be most constructive, non-personal, and targeted at specific behavior.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Dr. Ryne Sherman from Hogan Assessment Systems, and I'd like to thank Ryne for sharing his tips on how challenging performance reviews should be handled.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.